Hey everyone, thanks a lot for having me today. I think that this keynote is quite exciting for me. I've never given a keynote before, but I know at BSides Ahmedabad, there's been many excellent keynotes in the past from Franz Rosen, Yassine, Hussein, Geek Boy, and I'm excited today to join their ranks and hopefully pass on some knowledge that is quite useful to the crowd here today. So today I'm going to be talking about hacking on bug bounties for 10 years. It's been a long journey. I can't believe that it's been 10 years already. But today we're going to be going through the progression, the techniques, and the learnings. And that's what the presentation is split up into. And hopefully you can take some stuff away from today. I want to start off with a little bit about myself. So I've been hacking on bug bounties for over 10 years. I'm the co-founder of Keynote, which is the leading attack surface management platform. And I've won Most Valuable Hacker twice at HackerOne events and also won Most Valuable Hacker at Bug Crowd events as well. So I've been doing this for a long time, but I can assure you that I have very humble beginnings. And at the very beginning, I was definitely not finding that many amazing things. And today I want to go into that as well. So first thing I want to talk about is how bug bounties changed my life. And I think many people here will also resonate with this because I think it has the opportunity to change anyone's life given enough dedication and time in this field. So I want to take a quick trip down memory lane at the beginning of this journey. So 11 years ago, I remember dreaming that I would love to work in computer security. It never seemed like a reality. There wasn't much of an industry back then, 11 years ago. And my parents had immigrated to Australia with a lot of hardship. Actually, my family is from Gujarat. I have a lot of family in Ahmedabad. I speak Gujarati. I'm from Gujarat itself. So my family had immigrated to Australia, and really, there wasn't really that much opportunity for me back then at all. I was working at a fast food restaurant, the equivalent of Burger King in Australia called Hungry Jack's. And I was, just submitting bug bounties here and there because I had a deep passion in hacking, but I wasn't actually finding much success. I was usually told that my reports didn't actually have much of a security impact at all. So what did my first bug bounty reports look like? Well, you can take a look at the screen. It's just basically output that I was taken from a scanner and just submitted to a program. At the time, 11 years ago, 10 years ago, one of the first bug bounty programs was PayPal. And PayPal would just accept reports via email, and I would just send through these reports. I was 14 at the time, so I mean, there is still a little bit of embarrassment showing this to the crowd here today, but everyone starts somewhere, and I think it's very important to realize that and to understand that. So these reports had no security impact whatsoever. And as you can imagine, PayPal said, we're not quite interested in these security reports, maybe try again, maybe find something with some more security impact. So this response, they basically said, look, this is interesting, but we can't really pay a bounty for this. And as time progressed, being 14, there was definitely a lot of cringe involved with this process. I started to try harder and harder to get bug bounties at the time, even though my security reports didn't actually have much security impact at all. So you can see I've started to move into the red font and bold and all this sort of other techniques in my emails to try and get them to pay me a bounty, but ultimately my security reports didn't actually have that much impact. In this report, I was reporting an admin panel at the time, and it's cool that the admin panel is exposed, but it didn't necessarily have anything significant enough for them to pay a bounty. So again, there was no security impact, there was no bug bounty. And I guess I'm back at my fast food job working for $6.50 an hour. But I kept looking when I had the time. I kept looking for security vulnerabilities, kept working on this, and kept being persistent in this process. So this is the maximum cringe email that I have from 11 years ago, where inside the email itself, I put in the words very serious, bolded them, and literally made it like 40-point font. Now this is me 11 years ago really trying to get a bug bounty. I was failing consistently at getting bug bounties, and I was sending in reports that were escalating in terms of the font size and the colors and things like that. But ultimately, these reports did not get me the bug bounties I was looking for, and I really had to rethink about what I was trying to do here and go back to the drawing board and understand what I need to learn to be successful in bug bounties. But yeah, this was probably my maximum cringe moment in bug bounties when I first started. And I just want to show you because everyone starts somewhere. So yeah, I got paid for some bugs, right? Like I got paid for some issues that probably would never get paid out today. For example, there were some issues for SSL related things, TLS related things that they paid $250 for, or whatever else. But that amount of money was monumental to me. Even making $250 from Bug Bounties was incredible, because as I mentioned earlier, I was making like $6.50 an hour working at a fast food job. And even after working for 8 months, I had made just under $1,000. And that was hard, grueling work. I would say harder than hacking, probably. But it wasn't until a year after that I found my first critical vulnerability. And it was an SSRF vulnerability inside PayPal's Bill Me Later. The way that I found this was relatively simple. I was just Google dorking one day and I found this endpoint that let me pivot into the internal network of Bill Me Later. Now, just to clarify, on this slide, all you're seeing here is the flow of requests. So there was a page on merchants.billmelater.com which let you access other internal sites on Bill Me Later, and it returned the full HTTP response inside after that request. So this was my first critical bug that I'd submitted to the PayPal bug bounty, and this is something that, frankly, changed my life. So after submitting that first critical bug, that payout alone was enough for me to never show up at my fast food job ever again. And ever since that payout, I've been heavily involved in bug bounties. It gave me the motivation to continue working on this for the last 11 years. And I needed this validation in order to actually really get into this field. And thanks to PayPal, and at that time, that bug submission, that really did give me that validation. The thing that I learned from this initial endeavor into bug bounties was that persistence was key, and reporting issues consistently was also key in the success of bug bounties. So that brings me to the next thing, which is, what have I been up to for the last 10 years, right? So this presentation is trying to recap the last 10 years, some of the things I've learned, some of the things that I've picked up. So ever since my first critical bounty, I've constantly been working on finding more critical bugs in this space. Many different companies, many different industries. It's been quite exciting. And in order to do this, I've had to pick up many skills along the way. Back from when I was a 14-year-old to now today, there are many different things that I've had to pick up in order to be successful. And this really did require the ability to plan out long-term goals with short-term execution. And I can talk a little bit more about that in a little bit, and a little bit about the skills that I've had to pick up. So the roadmap for everyone is going to be different. But for me, I spent a lot of time becoming good at engineering, reconnaissance, source code analysis, and exploitation of web apps. Now, this was the things that I chose to focus on, but my advice to people is to focus on the things that you love and the things that you enjoy, because if you don't have passion for it and you don't enjoy it, then you may not have the energy and motivation to keep doing it for a long period of time. But as I said, I had to pick up these skills, and I realized that even when we built AssetNote, the company I co-founded, which is an attack surface management platform, that another thing that's very difficult is being a good engineer. And I think that many hackers don't actually understand how difficult good engineering is. And shout out to all the amazing engineers out there, because it is quite a difficult thing to engineer something that's scalable, large, big, and works reliably. But it was important to have pragmatic visions about where I wanted to be so I could prepare in the short term. So this brings us to the first part of the presentation, which is the progression. And I'm just going to quickly go through some of the things that have happened in the last 10 years in my journey, and hopefully there's something that you can pick up from it that inspires you or maybe gives you an idea of what a progression might look like for yourself. So everyone starts somewhere. From 2012 to 2017, which is 5 years, as you saw earlier, my first few bug bounty reports had very little impact and barely got paid. And I worked very hard to be accepted in the most prestigious university in Australia. My parents actually wanted me to be a pharmacist, and I told them, no, thank you, I want to break into computers. And that was quite interesting, because in every road of my journey, I've had to battle with either my family or parents or whatever it may be, and not really battle, but more convince them that the direction that I'm taking is the right one for me. Anyways, even though I joined this university, I started working full-time in the information security industry as an intern. I was traveling 3 hours a day, every day, just to get to work, and basically work without any pay, just to learn about the security industry. Ultimately, after being in the industry for a little bit of time, I decided to drop out of university. Now, I'm not saying that this is the best option for everyone out there, but at the time for me, I really found that the industry was something that excited me more, and I decided to drop out of the industry, university to pursue the industry. After that, I was working as a contractor for Atlassian, and I found a security vulnerability every day for the days I was employed, which was a personal goal that I put to myself, and that was quite a successful goal that I was very happy that I did. I joined Ernst & Young after that, which is a Big Four consultancy, EY, and I got to learn a little bit more about corporate culture and how to navigate that sort of environment. And lastly, in 2015, I joined Bishop Fox, which is an amazing company where I worked night shifts in Australia for a year and got to work with some amazing hackers there doing offensive security work. But then in 2017 to 2018, I decided to go full-time on Bug Bounties. Now, this might be something that people may consider to do here or any time in the future. This is an interesting avenue to take. I did Bug Bounties full-time for a year. I literally moved halfway across the world to Krakow in Poland and did Bug Bounties for a year full-time. It can be stressful, but at the same time, it can be quite rewarding. As long as you have a good backlog of bugs, you're able to sustain your lifestyle. But as I was doing this, I'd built the first few versions of AssetNote, the product that we now sell to enterprises. And I wasn't really successful at all. My parents wanted me to settle down and get a job at a big company like a Microsoft or a Google. But I used to keep telling them, no, this is gonna work, this is gonna work, please believe me, it's gonna work out. So, many people didn't really understand what I was doing when I first started building my product. But ultimately, with persistence, I found that there was success in that as well. And from 2018 to 2013, for the last 5 years, I've been building AssetNote. And that's with my co-founder, Michael Generakis. We launched the company, we rewrote the product, and we've had huge commercial success with it. We defined the attack surface management space, and we were one of the first in this space, pioneering the direction of the industry. So it's been quite exciting, and I guess my experience as a hacker has been quite important when it comes to running and building a company as well. So now that I've gone through the progression, that's just a short summary of what the last 10 years has looked like for me. Now, everyone's going to be different. Everyone's going to have a different journey. But for me especially, I found that being a hacker, going into engineering and going back into hacking has been quite an enlightening process. And as I mentioned earlier, learning how to be a good engineer I found to be very interesting and very humbling when it comes to coming as a hacker, going into engineering. So that's my journey, and in my journey, I've had to pick up a lot of things that I was mostly interested in, things that I was really excited about, things like source code analysis or security research or even just engineering, whatever it may be. And really the key differentiator that I think in my journey, when assessing it, is that I was very, very passionate about everything I wanted to do. If there was something that I was excited by, I would spend weeks, months on that single area just to become the best I could possibly be at it. So I'm going to move on to some of the techniques, and today I want to talk about some techniques that are practical, and hopefully you can take something away from these. When you're doing some application security testing, you can look back at some of these techniques and think, hey, I saw this at this presentation, I might give it a go. So the first technique I'm going to be talking about is just mainly looking at GraphQL and understanding GraphQL in a little bit more detail. So when you normally look at GraphQL, most modern applications, they have introspection disabled. Introspection is a very useful feature of GraphQL that gives you back the schema. The schema is necessary in order for you to, it can be necessary for you to fully understand the attack surface of the GraphQL API. So this is an example of a GraphQL API that's disabled the schema enumeration. So it's just returning an error saying that introspection is disabled, you cannot get the schema. So how do we get past this? Well, there are three main ways that you can get past this. The first is looking for dev or staging subdomains, which sometimes have introspection enabled. And this has happened recently in a live hacking event where I did for BugCrowd, where the dev subdomain had introspection enabled, and you could get the entire schema, and it worked one-to-one on the production schema. The second is a tool called Clairvoyance X. This is quite an amazing tool. It uses oracles to figure out whether or not there are certain queries or mutations inside the GraphQL schema. So you can just get this off GitHub and run it across any GraphQL API to see what mutations and queries exist, and then enumerate them further and find vulnerabilities in them. And the last one, which is often underappreciated, is looking at the JavaScript and analyzing it to figure out what the queries and mutations are in itself. So I want to do a little bit of a case study with Clairvoyance X. So I work a lot with Franz Rosen on certain bug bounty programs, and we came across a certain program that had introspection disabled, so we used Clairvoyance X to enumerate the schema. This was the command that I used here, pretty basic command. And once we enumerated the schema, we found a bunch of really weird internal GraphQL queries that were meant to be for administration purposes, but somehow had been exposed inside the schema. These APIs allowed us to go from a name of a user to all of their personal information and sensitive information. So how does Clairvoyance X actually work? That's maybe a good thing to look into. Well, it basically sends a large number of guesses, and the API will respond with a large number of suggestions if there is a suggestion. So it's just using an oracle to determine whether or not there is potentially a query or mutation that's possible in this GraphQL schema. So you can see here it's sending a bunch of different English words, and in the response it's saying, we couldn't query this, did you mean this? So that's how this enumeration works. And in this example specifically, we found this query which let us search organizations based on a company name, and it would return a UUID after doing that. After that, we were able to combine this with another query that would return all the PII of the user. So you can see in this, it's just doing the search orgs query, it's returning the UUID, and then there's a second query called search memberships, which will then let you search all the memberships for a given UUID. So when you do this, you can then ultimately get all of the membership data, and that includes all of the PII of the users. So at the end, it looks something like this. I guess the reason that I'm even highlighting it today is because GraphQL or APIs in general are quite a hot topic right now, but a lot of people sometimes struggle with looking at these APIs. What I can say to you is that it's like any other API, and you just need to be able to enumerate the queries and mutations and understand how to build these in order to discover certain hidden things or to enumerate them or test them further. And in this example, we were able to go from just knowing the name of a company to searching all of the memberships and returning all the data within all of these memberships. Now, I will note that this example that I'm giving you is not just some small random company. This is a really, really big company, and this would have been hundreds of millions of users at the end of the day. There are some additional GraphQL security techniques that I would recommend, which are looking into things like IDOR, SQLi, file disclosure, SSRF, and RCE. These are all things that existing bug classes that may affect GraphQL APIs that you should also test for. And lastly, GraphQL allows batching. And I've written a blog post on this that you can follow through this bit.ly link, which lets you understand how batching works. But essentially, if there's like an endpoint that lets you reset a password with a PIN, in GraphQL you can do batching via queries or via JSON, and that will let you send, let's say, 10,000 requests at once inside a single request through the batching mechanism. So that's another thing that you may want to look into, and I've written a blog post on that as well. The second thing I want to quickly go through, and this is probably the hallmark of my success, is security research. Now, a lot of people may be a bit confused by what security research actually means in this day and age, since it's such an ambiguous term. But at the end of the day, what I'm talking about is taking apart products and doing some research in order to find zero-day vulnerabilities. My opinion is that the real shadow IT is actually vendor software. On most of the attack surfaces that we analyze, most of the attack surfaces that our customers have, the thing that they really don't know about and really don't have control over is the vendor software that they deploy. And when I say vendor software, that might be any software manufacturer that provides an on-premise installation of their software, and this company then implements it on their attack surface. So really, if you look at our blog post, we've spent a lot of time finding vulnerabilities 0 days inside vendor software. And that's one of the things that we're most well known for, and honestly, it's my opinion that this is the real shadow IT. In security research, one of the hardest things is actually obtaining the software and setting up the software. So obtaining the software requires a lot of patience. I have a number of different techniques to do this. I look for it on GitHub, I look for it on Docker Hub, gists, vendor support portals, archive URLs, Fiverr even, freelancer websites, sales calls, Google Docking, and many other ways. One of the tricky things with vendor software is most companies don't want to give you the installation file without going through some sort of sales process. So you have to get kind of creative in order to find these files and in order to actually set up this software yourself, because you're going to need to do that in order to reverse engineer it and find the vulnerabilities within that software. Once you've got the software, it can be quite tricky even setting it up, and sometimes we joke that setting up the software is harder than hacking it. But yeah, I cover this more in my talk, How to Do Code Review, which you can find at this link here. When it comes to auditing the software, in order to find these vulnerabilities, you have to spend a lot of time reverse engineering the source and finding from sink to source or source to sink what the vulnerabilities are. The number one thing that we do is we map out the pre-authentication attack surface. I think for people interested in bug bounties, that is one of the most impactful things, to find things that are pre-authentication. But yeah, we end up auditing many different languages, protocols, systems, and as I mentioned earlier, I do have a link to some slides that I've done in the past which go over this in more detail. But essentially, the number one important thing to do when you have this software and source code is to map out all of the different routes and understand what is pre-authentication versus post-authentication, and understand where any dangerous functionality may be living so you can investigate further. One of the other things that might be interesting to you from a bug bounty perspective is how do you manage disclosure? This is something that we have often had to deal with during our work at AssetNote as well. And if you found a zero-day vulnerability, and you have to disclose it to the vendor first before you can use it on bug bounties. We do often use zero-day vulnerabilities in bug bounties, but this is only after we have established communication with the vendor, disclose the issue to the vendor, and then we start using it within bug bounties. The typical guidelines for this is what Project Zero follow, and also something that we follow as well, which is a 90-day disclosure deadline. And that 90-day disclosure deadline is basically, if it doesn't get fixed within the 90 days, we will publish. If it gets fixed within whatever time period, we'll publish after the 30 days. So that's essentially the policy we follow, and once the bug has been disclosed to the vendor, it's your choice on this whether or not you want to wait for a patch and then report it to bug bounty programs, or report it immediately to bug bounty programs. This is something that's really your choice, as it is something that you found. And lastly, I want to talk about something that is important from an automation perspective. If any of you hackers here are trying to automate these vulnerabilities and finding these vulnerabilities at scale, good research needs excellent capabilities. And what I've got here is just a picture of a clownfish and an anemones about the security research team, but the capabilities built by the engineering team are really the key to this. So if you are building automation, then it doesn't matter if you found the best zero-day in the whole world, but in order to capitalize on it, you need to have really good capabilities in order to scale this out and be able to scan a very large number of things very efficiently and very accurately. So this is something that our research team relies on at AssetNote. We have an amazing engineering team that we spend a lot of time with in order to find these vulnerabilities at scale. So this is something that's important as well. One of the things that many security researchers find is this graph here, where initially you start off with hope, you have no bugs, maybe a bug, the bug was a fake, and understanding the system led to a real bug, but the bug is not even reachable in a default config. So this is something that happens all the time when you're doing security research, and you might have to spend weeks and weeks and weeks in order to find something that is exploitable in a default config or in pre-authentication state. I do want to drop a quick zero-day as well, which is Office Web Apps full read SSRF. So you can, this was reported to Microsoft, but they refused to issue a CVE, and I'm not even sure if it's patched in the latest version of Microsoft Office Web App Server. But essentially, you can host the Python Flask script with the following, which basically is just a redirector. And you can have a HTTP request that looks something like this, which while it's hitting an XLXX file, it's actually going to redirect to an arbitrary location. The only filtering that Microsoft was doing on this was confirming that the file ended with the term .xlsx, with the extension xlsx. So this leads to full SSRF. This is an undisclosed vulnerability. Feel free to use it. I'm sure that there's many Office Web App servers out there that are vulnerable to this. One of the other techniques that I quickly want to talk about today is finding viable SSRF candidates. Maybe people here have come across an SSRF vulnerability but haven't been sure how they can exploit it or how they can prove impact. This is something that's often a tricky thing to do. Often when there's intended functionality to use some sort of link unfurling or to preview things or to do webhooks or whatever, you may struggle to prove that there's impact to the security teams at any company you're reporting to. So I want to recommend this tool that we created earlier this year, and it's quite a basic tool, but it does the job. It's called Surf. I've used it on several live hacking events, and I've been pretty much shocked at how easy it is to escalate SSRF vulnerabilities through this tool. What it does is quite simple. It takes a list of assets, it sends a request to all of these assets from your internet connection, and it checks which assets are not responding in any way or form. The key here is that we're finding assets that have an external IP address that are not responding from your internet connection. We can obviously see all the internal assets as well through the DNS records, but what we're looking for is for assets that have an external IP address that are not responding from your internet connection. And the reason why is we have very complex cloud environments today. These complex cloud environments, there's all sorts of security group rules, there's all sorts of networks and firewalls that you may not know of, but in reality, a lot of the SSRF filtering functionalities in this day and age focus on internal assets. They focus on blocking internal IP ranges, they focus on blocking internally facing assets. They're not usually focusing on the externally facing assets. So what this tool will do is it will return a list of assets that are external from an IP perspective, but are not responding from your internet connection. And this has led to a lot of different vulnerabilities that I've found in the last few live hacking events, led to really big payouts as well, where the security team had no idea that the SSRF let us access certain things that it shouldn't. So it doesn't have to be hard to prove impact on SSRFs. You can just basically use my tool, grab all the data from it, and then pipe it into your SSRF to see what comes back. So this is an example where we have the tool running on paypalcorp.com, and at the end it spits out all the IP addresses that are internal and external. You could then pipe that into Intruder, or you can pipe that into any of the other tools to see whether or not your SSRF does lead to some level of security impact. And yeah, here's an example. So there was a target for one of the live hacking events where they had this functionality inside a knowledge base which basically scraped the websites that you would provide it and return data. With Surf, I found a bunch of externally facing IP addresses that weren't something that I could hit with my internet connection. I put it into this knowledge base thing, and essentially it crawled all the websites, and it led to me accessing internal tools of this organization that really I shouldn't have been able to access. So Surf is something that's quite powerful when it comes to looking at externally facing assets that may be viable SSRF candidates. And yeah, segregating traffic in cloud environments is quite difficult. As any large organization will know, cloud environments are quite tricky, and you may have different security groups and firewalls that these SSRF vulnerabilities can completely bypass. And the last technique I want to go through today is about IaaS. Now, I've talked a lot about IaaS in my career. IaaS is one of my favorite technologies to hack on. And the first thing I want to say is don't skip the blue page. When you see the blue page, there's something there. Don't skip the blue page, please. There's something there. They don't just deploy IaaS servers that are blank for no reason. There's something there. You've got to find it. It can be difficult to find. I agree with you. But do not skip the blue page. That's probably one of the best advices I can give you. You just got to keep working at it, do some more reconnaissance, and hopefully find what you need to find in that server. So you may be asking, like, why should I love hacking IaaS servers? Well, there are several reasons why you should love hacking IaaS servers. You can get RCE quite easily through local file disclosure via view states. You can use local file disclosure to download all the DLL files inside the bin folder to obtain all the source code. You can, C# is a fun language to audit. It's quite easy, straightforward. It really cleanly decompiles. Shells can be dropped in various different formats, in web config files, in XAML files, in ASP or ASPX files, many different formats. And IaaS short name gives you partial file names and folders. There are no other servers in this day and age that are that leaky as IaaS compared to everything else. Getting the partial file names and folders is quite phenomenal in my perspective. And the last thing is IaaS directory to virtual host routing. Now that's the one thing I'm going to cover today, because everything else in this slide has been covered in detail by other people in other conferences or on blog posts and things like that. But I believe that this last point has not been covered in detail, and I want to just go through it really quickly to kind of bring you all up to speed with something that I've been doing in the last few months when it comes to hacking IaaS servers. So what is IaaS directory to virtual host routing? How does it actually work? Well, it's quite simple. You have different virtual directories, different directories that are routed to different internal hosts. So you can see in this diagram here, you have a directory called SSO or ENUS or admin, and they're all routed to different internal servers. Really, the number one fundamental flaw with this is due to directory traversal. So what can happen is you can have something like /SSO/ dot dot %2f and go to this specific endpoint that leaks all the credentials, for example. Now, this is something that happened to me for a really large aviation company, and it led to many critical findings where I was pivoting into a specific internal server and going back a directory and then accessing things that I shouldn't have been. So what's actually happening behind the scenes? Well, behind the scenes, what's actually happening is when you go to /SSO, it's going to 10.1.1.1, and then it's going to the directory /SSO on 10.1.1.1. When you go to /SSO dot dot %2f, tools, monitor, config settings, what's happening is it's going to 10.1.1.1, and it's traversing back one directory and then accessing things that you probably shouldn't be able to access. So this is a technique that I think isn't really spoken about much. It's a secondary context technique, which is something that Sam Curry is quite famous for working on. But this is something that I found on many IaaS servers that is quite interesting and sometimes hard to enumerate from an external perspective, but once you find it, it can be quite impactful. Now, with all the tech stuff aside, and I hope that some of it was valuable to you, I know that I've just run through it, I want to quickly go through some of the learnings that I've had in the last 10 years and wrap up all of this in a minute or two. The first thing is be careful with who you collaborate with. I think this is a very sound advice to give to people that are starting off in this industry. I wish everyone would treat you equal, but not everyone does. And I think that, I've written about this in the past, but sometimes even showing someone a vulnerability or technique, they'll assume that they have ownership over it, they can use it themselves or whatever it may be. So you have to be quite careful about who you share stuff with. You have to build a group of trusted friends and networks that you can trust and you can work with. So when collaborating with others, also be upfront with what your terms are and what your conditions are. If you want an equal payout or if you want more, whatever it may be, before you even share any information, you should be quite upfront with what you want from this. In my opinion, equal splits are the best way to do bug bounties. I tend not to do any bug bounties that aren't equal splits with respect to everyone's time and effort. And the next advice I have is build real relationships. I think that one of the things I've learned in the last 10 years is you're only as powerful as your network and relationships. And these relationships they go much beyond just the bug bounty aspect. They are people that today I'm happy to call some of my best friends in this industry. The people that I collaborate with are also people that I have deep connections with beyond just the bug bounty space. We take care of each other, we talk to each other, we always look out for each other. So that's something that's quite important. One of the other things that I think is quite important is hack because you love it, not because of any other reason. Ground your roots in your passion. It's what's going to keep you going at the end of the day. If you follow your curiosity and you enjoy your time hacking, you will naturally be led to amazing places, and in the community and in bug bounties. If the reason you're hacking is due to your passion, you won't experience much burnout, to be completely honest. You might have some down periods, you might have some time that you won't be able to work on things, but at the end of the day, you'll get back up and you'll keep working on what you love. And that's my opinion, especially in this field. If you love what you're doing, you're going to enjoy it a lot more, and you're going to be able to last a lot longer. So hack because you love it. And sometimes it's not always a profitable venture. Sometimes security research is not just about making money, it's about the curiosity and what you're interested in. So surround yourself with people that love hacking as well. Next one is pick your niche. So one of the things that you can be quite powerful at in this space is there's so much space for us. There's so many niches for us. If you find something that's very specific that you're very good at, you have a likelihood of doing so much better than other people. So there are many opportunities, and becoming very good at something is quite amazing. As you've seen in the last few years, the Web3 space has been really taking off. And there are many people in the Web3 space that have amazing talent there. But similarly, in application security, there's all sorts of different areas that you can become very talented in. Whether that's going to be web application security, internal testing, or APIs, or source code review, or whatever it may be. If you find something that you really enjoy, if you pick that niche and you study it, and you become really good at it, then you have a great chance at competing in this bug bounty world. And yeah, I know this is kind of cliche, but follow your heart. Don't let anyone stop you. I mean, in the last 10 years, I think a constant theme in my career has been people telling me that I should be doing something or I shouldn't be doing something. But every time that this has happened, I've just kind of decided to follow what I thought my best opportunities were or what I really wanted to do. And if someone says to you, oh, I don't think that idea is great, but you think it's great, then I think you should still go ahead and try it as much as you can. It's not really their fault. I think everyone, you don't need to convince everyone. As long as you yourself think it's the right thing to do, I think you should do it. And yeah, at the end of the day, do what you want to do. It's better than doing nothing, and everyone's journey is different. I'm not saying that what I've experienced in the last 10 years will be the same for you, but it's certainly something that I wanted to share in this keynote with you guys as well. And lastly, probably the most important thing is to take care of your mental health. Bug bounties are brutal. You're going to have many days where you spend days, weeks, where you make nothing at all. And at the end of the day, you need to be kind to yourself, and you need to take care of your mental health. You should get a good sleep, work on your mental health constantly, and introspect and solve problems. Your skills will be amplified if your mental health is in a good state. So that's the last tip that I have for you. And I guess in this last 10 years, the one thing that I just kind of reflect through is all of the highlights that I've had these last 10 years. We founded AssetNode in 2018, which is the initial team that we had in an apartment in Brisbane. With the United miles that I made, I traveled the world, went to Taiwan, went to Tokyo, and in 2019, we found an RC in Zoom in a Singapore live hacking event with the team at AssetNode. And in 2021, we presented on Kite Runner, which is an API security scanning solution. Anyways, that's all for today. Thank you all for having me for the keynote. I hope this was informative and adds a bit of value. Are there any questions?